You're listening to Radio Flange Goblet, which probably means some of your trousers have stains on them that you've long forgotten where they came from, but it probably has something to do with that night you spent drunk in Hull with a group of circus children and a freak show donkey. Coming up at 9 p.m, it's They're All in the Distillery Glenda, a wacky half-hour sitcom about people who make beer falling over and losing all their clothes, while an austere and mustachioed foreman, played by everyone's favourite old camp mental person, Dickie Chafe, looks disapprovingly at them and occasionally says a catchphrase about having it up to here, which people howl with laughter at, because it's often in the context of sticking stuff up his bottom. And, hot on its heels, we've got a lot more from Terence Beige and his revolving conjoined twin leopards Harriet and Carlos. They'll be hosting a plate-licking contest and surprising one lucky amputee with a glittery new hedge and 40 pence in Papua New Guinea doubloons. But right now, you know what time it is. It's time for the After-Movie Diner, the show which the Limpworth Gazette once called something to do on a damp weekend after you've wrung about as much fun as there is to be had from removing the eyes from your less than pleasant relatives in a caravan in the Isle of Wight. This week's show comes from the Igloo, a fashionable Siberian restaurant where they only hire the very grateful but not very useful victims of severe frostbite. You won't know what's a blackened finger and what's a glazed pork rib at Climp Thursby's latest glittering night spot, where you might just rub elbows with the likes of local celebrity, renowned philanderer and host of TV's Gusset Pantry, Justin Flett, and his estranged son, Basil. Maybe you'll stick around after your 14-course tapas-style dinner where only every third plate has something on it, and it's usually a colour and consistency that reminds you of being very ill as a damp child, to enjoy the cabaret of Monsignor Leppy Hume and the Corsets. He bangs the bongos while his game female sidekicks read extreme feminist poetry while taking all their kit off.
You're listening to the After Movie Diner with your host, John Cross.
Yes, that's right, I am John Cross, and unfortunately this is mostly what's left of my face. Hello ladies, hermaphrodites, chicken fanciers, that man named Joel who hangs around the corner newsagents in a rain mat carrying a half-eaten carton of boiled eggs, some wayward nuns who have shrugged off the habit and started a doo-wop quartet to cover Neil Diamond songs, and who on the weekend knit enormous pink dongs to frighten a bishop with, Alan, third-time winner of the Oh, That's Where I Put My Handkerchiefs, Gregory, a fun game they play in Nepal using the rubberized skull of a close relative of Lech Wałęsa, and just about as many bus conductors as you can find in an all-night cafe in Nuneaton, playing gin rummy with a half a deck of dog-chewed playing cards and contemplating the deeper inner ennui everyone must feel when their bingo-calling ex-girlfriend has run away with a serial chamois leather collector named Rudolph, who secretly dreamed of playing the Artful Dodger in a porn parody when he was growing up. Welcome one, and welcome very much all. Before we get started with this week's show, a reminder that you can support the podcast over at patreon.com/aftermoviediner. That's patreon.com/aftermoviediner. And not only get some great rewards, but get the personal reward of knowing you paid it forward once. You can then smugly lord your goodness over all your friends at your next monthly backgammon and sour skittles social. You can also go to aftermoviediner.com and click on the Amazon link in the top right-hand corner before you do your Amazon shopping. It costs you absolutely no extra, but for everything you buy, Amazon kicks us a few shiny coins. Please do that. Bookmark us as Amazon.com if that helps. Anyway, finally, you can go to Misc Plumbing Fixtures, that's MISC plumbingfixtures.bandcamp.com, and buy the latest album from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures, Former Glory, which features the wondrous Dr. Console on keys, Johnny the Horns Cole on brass and also the keys, and the clear, bright Freedom Pipes of Jay Mayo on backing vocals. It's just $6 for 16 tracks, and every penny goes back to keeping AfterMovieDiner.com and this very podcast alive. So please help us out where you can, and if you can't do any of those things, at least please rate and review us wherever the podcast is found and help spread the word. With that, thanks so much for listening, and we really do hope you enjoy this very special show. We're in now, and we're ready to discuss a double bill of Mr. Pierre Weller.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so I don't have like an intro planned or anything, but let's just rollick on in. Hello and welcome to hello and welcome to the and welcome to the After Movie Diner. This episode is an extraordinarily special episode because back in the moderately hot seat, we have our first ever co-host and returning champion and wonder of all things Weller. And, I would say at this point right now, a Peter Weller aficionado supreme. I would say that he probably knows more about the man than everyone else. It's the one, it's the only, it's Mr. Sir Jon Wallace. How are you, sir?
I'm good, I'm very good. I don't think I can be an aficionado until I do what I've been tempted to do since we started the Woods and Weller series.
Right.
Which is to just buy all the Weller movies that we have seen on the most ridiculous, luxurious Blu-ray format I can find and have like my complete Weller collection.
Yeah. Well, it's odd. The only Weller that I own, I think, on Blu-ray is Shakedown, because they just released Shout Select just released Shakedown here in the US on Blu-ray, which is called Blue Jean Cop in the UK. I have Rainbow Drive, one of the ones we're talking about tonight. I have that on VHS, which I kind of would rather own all Peter Weller movies on VHS. That would be more of a... True. That would be more of a goal.
You say that, but the thing that, and I don't know, because it is one of the questions about both these films, and I'm probably
it's the question, why?
Well, no, I can see why. And so I can definitely see why in a couple of cases. I mean, the moustache alone is a reason to do one of the films.
The moustache, surely, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing that did strike me about both films was, because obviously I was watching rather dodgy versions of both films that occasionally would go all a bit pixelated.
Yeah.
And I did think, like, damn, I wish I could see, particularly Rainbow Drive, I wish I could see, like, a clean print of this. I'm not saying that suddenly it's going to be like seeing some film noir is revealed under the filth, because I don't believe it will be. But still, I don't know, there were a few little points where I thought, like, oh, for a TV movie, this is working pretty hard, you know. Yeah, and I'd like to see what it looked like clean.
It is a Bobby Roth special. Bobby Roth, who of course made Keeper of the City, which was the Louis Gossett Jr. movie.
I love that you've done two Bobby Roth films in the After Movie Diner. That says everything that anyone needs to know about this show. Yeah. That you've done two Bobby Roth films, and the other that's one of the things I like about Bobby Roth, because I had a quick look through IMDb before this, and what I love about a couple of people connected to these two films is that they are the most jobbing people I've ever seen on IMDb. Because a lot of other films we've done, you go in and go, Jesus, this bloke did nothing else. This bloke did like an episode of, Morse, and then disappeared off the face of the planet. Whereas these guys, particularly the, is it the director? Maybe it was Bobby Roth, or maybe it was the director of the other one. Has just been working absolutely solid and is still churning out films.
Yeah.
TV.
The director of the other one was Kevin Connor. And he did a whole bunch of stuff. Kevin Connor, the one who directed Hotel Mustache, which is also called Sunset Grill. He is British and probably has directed a Morse. I wouldn't be surprised. But he's done he has lived in the world of TV movie. I mean, he really has.
He's the one I'm thinking about, isn't he? Because doesn't he have stuff about to come out on IMDb?
Yeah. He's got a whole bunch of stuff. He just did a couple of TV movies last year called Love at First Glance and Do I Say I Do. But he also did the TV movies McBride, which stars John Larroquette. And he did a whole series of, like, probably lawyer or detective things called McBride. And Kevin Connor did a whole bunch. McBride, It's Murder, Madam. And McBride, Murder Past Midnight. And McBride, The Chameleon Murder. So clearly McBride is the series.
McBride meets McGroom.
Yeah, so right, so he did that, and then the guy who did Rainbow Nonsense, Bobby Roth, he has done what's old Bobber's been up to. Oh, in fact, I can tell you this: Bobbers and Weller reunited recently on the set of The Last Ship. I want to say it is. The Last Ship, which is this ludicrous TV series that's all, America and the Navy and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And Weller plays the main bad guy in like season 2, I think, or 3 of The Last Ship. And there is a photograph on Bobby Roth's Twitter, because of course I found him on Twitter, of him and Weller saying, "Nice to see Weller on the set of The Last Ship. Last time I saw this guy was Rainbow Drive," and he actually mentions Rainbow Drive. But yeah, he's done the reboot of MacGyver, Last Ship, the reboot of Hawaii Five-0. He did some Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He is Jobby McJobster when it comes to TV series.
Yeah, well, I find it kind of pleasing and reassuring that there are people out there who do have these careers that just go on and on and on. I like that. I like that those people are out there. The journeymen. The
Bobby Roths of the world. And if anyone...
I mean, if we're being mean, the journey hacks.
Right. Look, I mean, if you think about... Like, it's quite mind-boggling, just the amount of TV. Take away sports, movies, reality TV, and even miniseries, and just look at the, American half an hour to 40-minute procedural-style TV shows, whether they are sitcoms, cop shows, doctor shows, lawyer shows, whatever, or I don't know, a chef who's also solves crime while moonlighting as a doctor or something. All those shows, there's 24 episodes in a series, and there must be, with all the channels that there are now, there must be 7 quadrillion TV shows being made at any one time. So I'm sorry, if people can't get a job directing TV episodes, then really I would hang up the hat.
Yeah. Well, when I think about that Shia, because I think about it all the time. I mean, just when I scanned through Netflix, going, Jesus, look at all this stuff that I don't have any idea about, and all the stuff that's been there before. When you think about aliens being bombarded with these signals, going, don't go near them. There's just this endless, balls, transmitting off this planet. And, apart from the Peter Weller stuff, it's all pretty dodgy.
Yeah, they're endless, women attorneys with bobs who are putting the law on trial, or whatever the fuck it is. Or fucking CSI alone, the output of CSI alone and the NCIS, which is how there is, first of all, how there's CSI, but then how there is CSI Miami, CSI New York, CSI New Orleans, whatever it is, all the different ones. But then on top of that, there's NCIS, and then NCIS Memphis, and NCIS fucking Iowa, or whatever. And you're just how is this sustained? How is this just but it's a profitable thing that, anyone will tune into it. And then you get into, the whole Law and Order thing, and by criminy, you've got more things. I mean, Grey's Anatomy is entering its 15th season or something. You're well, how many illnesses are there? How many ruptured spleens do they have in Seattle? I mean, whatever it is. I don't know.
And I think what's what feeds into that is that someone like Weller has cropped up in in a number of these shows and pulled shows back from being pretty dodgy places and been frankly underused when they have cast him. I mean, the one that springs to mind is something like 24, where he came in as
He's amazing on season 5 of 24. He's really
great
good
on 24, and it was the only thing that kept me with 24 was when I found out that Peter Weller was in it. I thought, okay, well now I am going to watch that. And I even have, just by going into Netflix, I, typed in Peter Weller, and a couple of mad films came up. One of which is just sounds they both just sound awful.
Yeah.
But he does elevate poor material quite extraordinary degree, and it's genuinely not just that I am a fanboy. I am a fanboy of Wallace, but both the films that we are talking about tonight are so confusing and peculiar, deeply peculiar. That is extraordinary that he kept me with them for as long as he did.
Yeah, it was literally like Weller was drifting around Los Angeles, and when a particularly confusing, poorly constructed, gumshoe, made-for-TV movie flopped on his desk, he was like, "This is the very boy for me." And what's interesting...
Well, I know they do him just like walking around the streets and various people just like netting him as he walked around and dragging him into their studio a lot and forcing him to perform.
Yeah, put on this slightly mint green or mint olive leisure suit, wander around Los Angeles, being frankly bemused and sweaty. Like, he's sweaty in both these movies. In quite an obscene way. But no, what's interesting is that, obviously, we've commented before on our Woods and Weller series, and we must comment right now on the absence of Woods. I'm sorry, Woods has become too ludicrous even for this podcast. Like, he's become too insane even for us to consider covering his films anymore, because quite honestly his Twitter rants have, because they go beyond like, oh well, this is just his politics, and they quite frankly just become insulting and stupid and ludicrous to the point where you're just like, all right, Woodsy, enough, chump,
Well, I have to say, for me, it's not that isn't the reason why. For me, it was a much more practical reason, which is, I agree with you completely, but it was, I would have happily carried on Woods and Weller, but it was remarkable that, because we were just talking about it, weren't we? And we just started looking at IMDb, and Weller just had a wealth more stuff to look at.
Yeah, he really did. And
when you looked at Woods, it was very, very slim pickings indeed. There was one sort of promising-ish looking one, but then we just thought, well, there's probably a good 6 more Weller films and perhaps one Woods film. So should we just ditch it and do some Weller?
Yeah, and it's interesting you kind of bring up the jobbiness of the directors, because, although Weller's career has gone everywhere from, headlining something like RoboCop, to the Rainbow Drives and Sunset Grills of the world, which are the 2 films we're covering tonight, right down to, recently doing a lot of work on TV, whether it's Longmire, Last Ship, Sons of Anarchy. He's done a lot of TV stuff. He's really done the gamut of things in terms of acting.
And he loves it, doesn't he?
He loves showing up and doing it. He's a jobbing actor. And, we've talked before about how interesting it was that the 80s were this mad wasteland where people like Woods and Weller, who quite frankly odd-looking buggers and odd-acting buggers, that they could get leading roles in stuff, and we kind of found that charming and wonderful. And it's... But Weller started off in TV. He did a bunch of TV movies and miniseries when he started. I think most notably Butch and Sundance, the early days. I think that was one that certainly got him noticed back in the day, because I've sort of heard him talk about that a few times. So the fact that he's found himself back in TV after doing, a bunch of movies probably doesn't bother him as much, because he's like, well, it's, steady paycheck, as opposed to showing up as 15th fiddle in some kind of mad ensemble movie, or, I don't know, doing a day on some Marvel thing or whatever, like he did with Into Darkness. It's probably better for him to do a few series of episodes. You do feel that he doesn't look at things and go like, well, this isn't of my standard kind of thing. He's someone who goes like, what's the next thing, and sinks his teeth into it as deep as they'll go. Right.
And the other thing that that it sort of amuses me is the notion that the thing about these TV movies and all these other movies where he gets these roles is that when he's dealing with your jobbing directors like your Rob, whatever his name is, or
Bobby Roth or Kevin Connor.
Bobby Roth. When you're dealing with your Bobby Roths, the Bobby Roths of this world are not able to stop. But they are working to a timetable, and they have to produce a schlubby TV movie by Tuesday the 31st, or they don't get paid.
Right.
And so they are not in a position to stop a scene halfway through and go, sorry, Peter, did you just call him Bub? Peter goes, yeah, I call him Bub. Yeah, that's not in the script, Peter. So can we do it again? And can you just say the line?
Yeah. I refer to all men as cats. I refer to all women as chicks. Or
did you just? But stop, everyone. Peter, you said Daddy-O. Can you please stop? Because this has we are not doing a 1950s movie about, drag races on the East Coast. We are doing, a schlubby it's the 80s.
Yeah. Well, it's
no one ever had the time to pull him up on this stuff. So he just gets to
bebop his way through.
Skedat bebop all over all of these scripts, completely mess with them, and elevate them in the process enormously, in my opinion.
Well, I think that was the joyous find was that interview he did with Kevin Pollak.
Great. Yeah, that was
and
great.
To find that that's who he is. In real life, he is a scribbly-doo, scat-sing madman.
Yeah, scribbly-bop-bop. That's what he's singing to himself in the bar.
Dropping 50s, beatnik speak all over the place. With, using man and cat and dude and, baby and all these kind of words, but in a really,
dig it. He says dig it in a serious way.
And there's only a few people who can pull it off. I remember watching Race with the Devil with Peter Fonda and Warren Oates, and Warren Oates refers to everyone as baby, even guys, those guys who go around, hey baby, it's crazy baby, that kind of thing. Warren Oates is the only male I can think of who can pull off calling Peter Fonda baby and it come across as super masculine, and well as one of those guys who can, in the midst of the 80s, in mad nightclubs in movies like Rainbow Drive, can call people cats and Eurotrash and other such little things that he slings around, and it's kind of wonderful. So let's get down to it then. Let's leave Hotel Mustache till the end, because I think we'll probably have a little bit more fun with Hotel Mustache than Rainbow Drive. But Rainbow Drive is the aforementioned Bobby Roth movie from, I want to say, 1990, right? It's right on the... Yeah, it is, 1990.
Yeah, I don't actually know. I mean, one of the big... I mean... I quite liked Rainbow Drive, bits of Rainbow Drive, and I thought it had some tip-top Weller in it. I really did.
It had some great Weller, but the entire movie makes, especially once the ending is revealed, makes little to no sense. No,
that's what I was going to say. Is I watched it the night before last, and I genuinely would struggle to actually summarise what happens in the film, because there is I can summarise that. The basic plot of the film is it's someone read a lot of Elmore Leonard and and liked all that stuff. I wanted to do that sort of stuff TV film, and Peter Weller is a cop who stumbles across a sort of Manson family-esque butchering, sort of quite sexually tinged butchering in this house in Hollywood. And then it's very quick, and then quickly discovers that there seems to be some attempt by the authorities to cover up what took place. Then the rest of the film, you would imagine, would then explain to you what took place, but by the end of the film, you are no wiser as to what took place, or who did what, or who these people were, or any of that stuff, apart from occasionally going, "Oh, it's that bloke. I've seen him in a few things." Right. I mean, that is the extent of my understanding of what happened. I had no clue what happened, and I was giggling to myself at the end, going, "Is that supposed to mean something to me? Yeah. that name means nothing to me."
No, well, it all means nothing to me. It means nothing to me. I've actually seen the movie 2.5 times now. I've actually, because like I said, I bought it on VHS for
This is your life, is watching Rainbow Drive 2.5 times.
2.5 times. Because I'm trying to unravel the mystery of Rainbow Drive, because even this time, so I just finished watching it at like 5 to 4 as we were about to get on the phone, and I sat down at the beginning of this rewatch, and I'm watching it again. I'm like, I'm with it. About 25 minutes in, that he starts bebopping and scribbly doos different women's names. Like all of a sudden, there's this big thing about this woman called like Valerie something or Val something.
Yeah.
And then suddenly out of nowhere, they're talking about this Val thing, and I'm like, who the fuck is this Val? Like it comes out of nowhere. Then there's David Caruso, who's slithering around like a ginger lizard, who is literally the guy behind the mayor at City Hall, who leans around from behind the mayor and goes, "Yeah, stay away from my mayor," you know. He's such like David Caruso is such a ridiculous knob in anything, like he's never not been a ridiculous plonker in almost everything he's ever been in, and in this one he has dialed up his just punchableness up to 11. But anyway, they wander around with this woman's name. Then there's something about a nightclub that's run by a bunch of sleazoids that's maybe funneling money for some guy who's in the mayor's office, but is also runs a newspaper and is also like, I don't know, like it spirals out of control to the point where at the very end you're in an office with the guy from Love and Death. You know, it's the guy from Love and Death who tries. It's the sequence where he's been shot, but he's talking to Woody on the battlefield, saying, "Could you get something for this ring?" And Woody's like,
"For this, you paid $10."
Yeah. So it's that guy, right? Who is like the least menacing mastermind. And it turns out like he's killed his daughter, and what's even funnier is halfway through that scene, just as the man with the moustache and the ridiculous trousers from Love and Death is about to explain just what the fuck is going on, someone bursts through a door and like knocks him out and drags him out. And at that point, I'm watching the movie and I actually go, "No, I was just about to find out." And then at the very, very end, the FBI, who have been undercover the whole time, so all these people you've seen throughout the movie who are FBI guys, show up and tell Weller that he's just completely fucked over the case and lost everything. So you're like, wait a minute, I just sat through a movie that was interminably confusing.
Well, it's a mixture of...
To find out that Weller's ruined
definitely, whoever wrote it definitely read a load of Emil Leonard, and then someone showed him Chinatown, because it's like a really low rent, very, very, and you almost wonder whether it's so confusing because I don't think it is for a minute. I think it's just because it's bad,
right?
But it may be that it's so confusing because someone went, Chinatown's confusing. If I got really confusing, then I'd really be making something clever. But what I also really, really loved about it is, there's, the thing you've got to learn, the reason to watch these films is for these moments where you go, huh? And there was some brilliant stuff with, everyone's bugging everyone in this film. Like everyone's bugging everyone. There's bugs everywhere. He comes back and there's bugs everywhere, and this house is bugged and that house is bugged. Yeah. And there's
more bugs in this than Naked Lunch.
Yeah, and the partner of the guy who was kind of Weller's partner but isn't his partner, who died.
The guy who looks like a used car salesman.
Yeah, but he was actually quite good. I quite liked him. But they suddenly set, at first he's reluctant. He doesn't want to get his family in trouble. I've got a family. I've got to protect them. I don't want to take on City Hall. And then, literally the next scene, he set up a complete NSA infrastructure in some cellar. Like, you're never introduced where this place is. There's never even an establishing shot of this place. You just see Weller enter a cellar. Yeah. This guy has set up this hugely intricate surveillance operation on some people, and you're not even... Oh, it's the nightclub, isn't it? It's the nightclub. You're like, who are these people? Like, I don't know who these people are, or why we're interested, or what even we're trying to establish. That's the most extraordinary thing about it. And who are we after?
And riddle me this.
Done something?
Riddle me this. Why, when seemingly there is nothing famous or interesting about them at all, does Bobby Roth decide to focus not once but twice on this nightclub band, which might as well have Like, they are literally, it's it's middle-aged, balding men in sports jackets.
It's a wedding band that would be booed at a wedding.
And the best thing ever is that the first 4 lines of one of their songs is thinking small, rob a gas station, thinking big, become the leader of the nation. Ooh, the American dream, Johnny. Like, it's the fact that they add Johnny at the end of it tells you all you need to know about.
And that
this
also
band.
comes in at the end. After there's been this attempt at a "forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown" moment, which is actually just a really confusing what moment. Suddenly, ooh, Johnny, it's the American dream comes in at the end. Like, really, this is the song you end it on? Because the other thing is they actually had some fairly serviceable 80s suspense music running through the film.
The music was done by Tangerine Dream, which were like big. They had done Thief and they had done To Live and Die in LA. Like, they were a big, moody soundtrack.
Well, that's the thing, because I thought it was quite a good little soundtrack. And that's why I'm saying that I have a bit of a soft spot for it, because I sort of thought there was a lot of promise there that unfortunately, it just by the halfway point you're like, oh god, this is so lost. But Weller as head of a homicide department doing basically a low budget Chinatown holds lots of appeal for me,
Right.
But if you are going to do that, give me some idea of who it is I'm supposed to be, who it is that he's invested in, who's investigating, because I have no idea. I'm completely at sea.
Yeah, I mean, I think my assumption, having watched it 2.5 times, is that there is a wealthy guy who is also a bad guy who has his daughter killed, and to cover up the daughter's murder, stages it like a kind of Manson family thing. But then that's also confusing because Weller keeps going on at the beginning that there were 5 bodies in the house when he went in the house. But when he gets the official notice from Caruso, because this is this other hilarious thing. So Peter Weller is the acting head of Hollywood Homicide, right? There's literally no need for him to be the acting. Just have him be the head of Hollywood Homicide. Like, the fact that he's acting doesn't really mean anything at all.
Who cares?
Who cares, right? Then David Caruso, who's the actual head of downtown Los Angeles, they get the collar, right?
That was one of those things they introduced in the film where you go, hey, what's the difference? Downtown Hollywood? What? What? What's the difference? And you're like bothered worrying, you're all over here worried about what the difference is between departments.
Right.
When you give a shit about what's happening in the film.
So the first 20 minutes of the movie, it's all people going, what's his character name? Gallagher. Hey, stop it, Gallagher. This is Downtown's case. And you're a Hollywood Homicide. Like, this is like the whole first 20 minutes, all people tell him to do is, you better stay away from this. This is Downtown's case. And then there's a bunch of other people who are going, shouldn't it be Hollywood's case? It happened in the Hollywood Hills. Like, and I'm just like, does it matter? Can we get on with it? So then his partner, who I think actually gets murdered in the movie for wearing outrageous sports jackets.
Yeah, why is he murdered? I don't no idea why
he's murdered for wearing ludicrously checked jackets.
I liked his checked jacket.
At one point, first of all, everyone in this drives classic cars from the 60s and 70s with no explanation whatsoever.
A golden car that's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. And then later on, even when he borrows a car from someone else, it's like this beautiful looking car as well. Like this bronzy car with a soft top and everything. He's like, can I get my car back? I'm like, do you all just drive amazing knockoff 70s cars? But anyway, so his partner drives out. He wears sweater vests, ties, checked shirts, checked jackets, and then he's wearing like a golf caddy flat cap. He looks absolutely ludicrous. He looks like he would sell you his daughter in order to do a deal on a used car or something. He is a ridiculous man. So there's all that business, but he keeps fish. This is another one of those things where they're like, oh yeah, try and weave in a metaphor about dead fish. I'm like, what? So at one point, there's a scene in this movie where Caruso shows up and goes, "You know why the fish keep dying, don't you?" What has this got to do with anything?
Yeah, well, he says there's a bit where he goes, he's ill, and he goes, he's not ill, he's suffocating, and that's supposed to have this sort of gravitas moment where you go like, "Ooh, that means a lot," and you go, "That means nothing. That means less than nothing."
Yeah,
and go away, Caruso, and stop like getting in the way of us finding out what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, well,
if you are shot in the head at some point, then I will be happy with your presence in this film. Right. But we don't even get that.
Well, then what?
No, he does have a decent death. Actually, that does justify him being in there. Yeah, he is killed in.
But what's funny is Celia Ward shows up to be both Peter Weller's love interest and a possible femme fatale. And what's crazy is that, like I say, the first half of the movie, people are like, "Stop it, Gallagher, this is Downtown's case." And then she crops up 45 minutes into the movie and says, "Stop it, Gallagher, this is FBI's case." And I'm like, people, like, at this point, he's not stopping, so people should probably just stop telling him to stop.
But perhaps Gallagher does everywhere Gallagher go. People, he's like at the airport picking up his suitcase and said, "Stop it, Gallagher, that's not your suitcase." And he goes along to the shop and goes, "Gallagher, that's not your shop." He just gets into cars. "Gallagher, that's not your car." Wherever he goes in life, it's just not the right thing.
Yeah, that's basically what Weller's dealing with. So let's talk about Weller's performance in this. Is there any standout tics and traits that he applies here?
There is. I noted them because it's slightly light on them, but he does do an amazing. He delivers an amazing. Because the thing is, he did keep me with it the whole way through the film, and for the first third of the film, I was actually quite into it and quite enjoying it. But he delivers an amazing "I'm going to fuck you up," a really, really good "I'm going to fuck you up." He does. He also says to a woman, and I wish that I could go back to being single, or in fact, I don't even need to be single. It doesn't need to be anything like that. I just need to say to someone at some point, I don't know what in God's name your trip is, because that's some good 60s speak.
Yeah.
He also at the bar scene says, "Do you know a cat named whatever?" And again, a big budget film, they would have stopped him and said, "No, the line is not, do you know a cat? It's, do you know a guy? It's not cat, guy." But they let him get away with it.
Yeah.
And he also, in a brilliant moment of and I was watching it going, Weller suggested this scene. This is Weller's idea, this scene, where there's a naked shower interrogation scene with this guy, where he's got a guy handcuffed in a shower, and you go, "What? Where's this shower? Where's the shower that he's interrogating? And where did this come from?"
Right. Yeah. There's no indication where any of this is happening.
And he's got slick back hair the whole way through it, and big 80s aviators, and he's looking sort of super cool through it. And to be honest, I was watching it just thinking, because it reminded me of things like LA Confidential as well, only not any good.
Right.
But Chinatown, LA Confidential, that sort of thing. And I just thought, I'd love it if because it made me think of Spacey being being edited out of that film.
Yeah.
Replaced by Plummer. And thinking, and the thing I thought about that was not because I don't, Kevin Spacey was amazing in some films, but in later films he sort of became almost a parody of himself. And I remember hearing about that, thinking I'd quite like to see Plummer being a really old, gnarled geezer. That's fine.
Yeah.
And you wonder I'd quite like to see Weller, a lot of films edited out, Spacey edited out a load of films and put Weller in them and give Weller that kind of career.
Right.
I think he's a fantastic presence, and yes, he would insist on throwing in this weird 50s speak all the time.
He would insist on it.
Yeah, I think that would elevate a lot of the movies.
Yeah, and in fact, I have to say, a lot of the charm of watching Weller and this might sound completely obvious, but it's not necessarily the movies he chooses to do. It's watching Weller. Like, he's one of those people that when you're dialed into the Weller vibe, you really don't want to change the station because any minute he might say something purely mind-boggling.
Yeah, and it is any minute as well, because he doesn't deliver any skedaddle-a-butt to do like speech for the first 45 minutes, and then suddenly there's a glut of it for about 20 minutes.
It's like watching, the reason why Woods and Weller worked so well is that it's like watching an old James Woods movie before he went mad, and knowing that any minute James Woods is going to shout and slam a door or bang a box on the ground or something, because any minute James Woods has to put the law on trial, the system, to rights, whatever. Like, any minute James Woods has to have, in the same way that any minute Peter Weller has to wax rhapsodic about philosophy, call someone a cat or a slime ball or a sleaze or something. And like, there are certain things that are just enjoyable about watching Weller. And, I go back and I think about some of the films we did, and while there are the obvious ones like, Buckaroo Banzai or something, where obviously the script itself is sort of mad enough that, Weller kind of fits it. There's also bits in Unknown Origin where it's just like a normal guy against a rat movie, if such a thing exists. But Weller puts in that amazing sequence where in his slow, mad drawl talks about rats, and you're just transfixed.
Yeah.
So he can just kind of do that. He can just, in these weird little B-movie genre films, can just find a way to Weller up the joint. And thank fuck he did, because it makes them, a million times more watchable.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting little mad-ass collection of work that he's done.
Yeah, I mean, no one's watching Rainbow Drive in 2018 if Weller's not in it. Like, nobody cares.
The After Movie Diner with John Cross will return right after this.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
This podcast takes no shortcut in producing outstanding content. How they haven't become more widely recognized is beyond me.
I love this show. Smart commentary, in-depth interviews, and great production.
It's obvious how serious these guys take their podcast and bring that next level of professionalism that anyone would be hard-pressed to match.
There are few things better in life than listening to people who are both passionate and knowledgeable about their subject matter. The Projection Booth, with their wide and wild range of film discussions, is one of those things. Simple as that.
The Projection Booth is the highest quality film podcast around. I love the focus on cult films, witty, informative banter, and amazing interviews. The Projection Booth is the best podcast out there if you're a serious film lover.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
Your guide to cinema etiquette from the Countdown Movie and TV Reviews podcast. Question 17. When choosing a seat at a largely empty movie cinema, do you
A. Sit directly in front of another person? B. Sit right alongside a couple clearly enamored with one another? Or C. Take a seat away from other patrons that affords you a good view? If you answered A or B, fuck you!
For more useful cinema etiquette, join Paul and Wayne on the Countdown Movie and TV Reviews podcast at Podomatic on iTunes or your favorite podcast app.
And now, here's your host, John Cross.
Let's wrap up Rainbow Drive and get into our large 70s gold Oldsmobile and skibibop across town to another seedy, sleazy part of LA and Sunset Grill. And I have to say, I've watched this twice as well. In fact, I think I've watched this 3 times, and I still don't know what's going on. This movie equally confused and bemused me, but I'll leave it to you again, sir, to kind of explain something of the plot.
Okay. I am actually slightly struggling to remember the plot.
Right. I'll do it very quickly then. Peter Weller plays the ludicrously monikered Ryder Hart, who is an ex-cop turned private investigator with the mustache and the hat to match.
Now, before we go any further, was the mustache Weller's idea? I think it was, because he looks really pleased with himself the whole way through the film.
What? I just don't understand where the mustache comes from. Unless he was playing a porn addict on Broadway in a play or musical called El Sleazo's Trousers. I don't quite know why he's grown that mustache. But I'll accept that it's Weller's idea of what he believes a sleaze bag private eye would look like.
Fine, sorry to interrupt. Continue.
It's all right. And the whole movie starts with this Benny Hill-esque sequence where Ryder is photographing a rather buxom woman in a naked tryst with a man, only for her ludicrously bald and enormous husband to show up. And in the attempt of Ryder and the husband and the naked couple to kind of sort it all out, they all end up on the bed together and the bed collapses in a kind of and then after that sequence we get the most bebopping Weller we've had when he talks about grey coffee, when his
that's right, yeah,
his estranged wife Anita's current squeeze, Jeff Carruthers, shows up, only to be like, what's going on here? And then Weller's all like, listen, man, this cat was trying to pay me to photograph this cat, and this cat was stooping his wife, and he's bebopping all over the place. Anyway, they go back to Sunset.
That was quite a good Weller listen, man, by the way. That's pretty good.
He's like, coffee isn't meant to be grey. So they go back to Sunset Grill, which is a bar that is owned by his estranged wife, where we find out about a guy called Guillermo, who is a Mexican immigrant who works in their cafe. From then on, his wife is murdered and attacked.
Yeah, because Guillermo. The Mexican guy is killed in Mexico.
Right. The Mexican guy is killed.
But before he's killed, he posts something.
Right.
And I think that guy is the guy who turns up in some series later on as the Latino to watch in like The Wire or something like that. Anyway.
Maybe, I don't know.
Before he dies, he posts something to Sunset Grill.
Right. That Weller flatly ignores. Like, Anita gives it to Weller while he's playing the pinball machine.
Yeah, I like that. He's a washed-up mess, and he just tosses it aside without even looking at it, which is a nice touch.
It's a nice touch. All the time dealing with Jeff, who is this straight-edged police detective who's schmoozing in on Ryder's wife. Ryder goes home a horrible alcoholic mess. His wife is murdered, and in investigating his wife's murder, he finds out that it might also have to do with people smuggling from Mexico, and it's also got something to do with Stacy Keach, who runs a gun range, who has an implausibly hot secretary who, for no apparent reason, goes to bed with Peter Weller, even though I've no idea, like... They're not trying to. The
sex scenes are laughable.
They are laughable.
And I don't mean hilarious. I mean laughable.
Yeah. So I don't know. So this is what I assume about this movie. Stacy Keach has something to do with the people smuggling. Laurie Singer, who's the hot secretary, is trying to keep Weller off the case because he's getting too close. Maybe that's her ploy, but ends up like really falling in love with him. They had his wife murdered because they were never clear. They had his wife murdered for the letter, but we don't know what's in the letter. And out of nowhere, Jonathan Rhys-Davies, who most people will know as Sala from Indiana Jones, who is Welsh and yet seems to get away with playing any other fucking nationality, as if the Welsh accent is somehow like tied inextricably to like Egyptians and Indians and Americans are going to sort out. Like, he just sounds like Jonathan Rhys Davis being a big fat Welshman in every movie. And he shows up as a racist cop who works on the kind of like Latino beat in downtown LA, like underneath the bridges of the LA River and all that kind of stuff. And he sort of, like, him and Weller kind of do a bit of a, dance back and forth. But again, not really sure. At one point there's a suitcase and a barking dog. I don't remember why.
But he throws Rhys Davies's suitcase over some wire where there's a barking dog.
Oh, there's also a bit where Stacy Keach has a doctor who's hopped up on like drugs or something. Like I've watched the movie 3 times and I don't know what's going on. At one point in this film, Peter Weller actually lassos Jonathan Rhys Davies. That is a thing that happens. He lassos him. That happens in this film. Yeah, and shoots him repeatedly in the bottom with a BB gun.
Yeah, that's right. And there are just... The whole thing is just like a series of... The reason why it did provide more fun than Thingy Drive is just... It was almost like there'd be long moments of just confusion and despair, and then suddenly something would come along which was so laughable, but in that sort of wellery way, that you could forgive it and get back in with it a bit. I mean, there was one bit with... I mean, this femme fatale is the least fatale femme fatale you have ever encountered in cinema.
Right,
and
exactly.
the sex scene, because a combination of... horrendous direction and appalling music is just laugh out loud funny. I mean, I was guffawing during the sex scene, and the general sense of Wellerness remains strong throughout. So there is a good sprinkling of Weller bebop throughout the film. So he calls someone son of a buck at one point. Son of a buck. Which I've never heard anywhere else before.
Also, at one point, doesn't he wear, like, a bejeweled, bright pink ZZ top cap?
Yes, he does, yeah.
For no reason.
And he's got that brilliant bebop, like, alternate swearing. So he calls people things like fuzzball and talks about places like Palookaville and calls people bub. And
he would be the police chief of Palookaville.
Fabulous line in it. There's a great line in it that he has, which I really liked, and I thought it was a really good noir-y line, which is, "I've been carrying this agony about with me like a goddamn wet mattress," which I thought was a really, really good line.
Yeah, it's full of good lines. It really is full of good lines, and it's full of like good Weller moments, but it's also full of inexplicable madness, like the sequence where or is this Rainbow Drive? No, this was Rainbow Drive, which I'm getting confused again.
Well, they do merge a bit. I mean,
they merge a bit, but there's that bit in Rainbow Drive which we didn't mention, but Megan Mullally, who ended up being on Will and Grace and married to Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec, plays the stewardess from the airline, who goes on about like Mahalo and talks in like this ridiculous voice about her friend Val and stuff. Like that whole sequence is mad.
It's Virgin. Just like me. In Hawaii they say mahalo.
Mahalo?
For thank you. I have this thing about the islands.
I noticed.
I go there all the time. I'm a flight attendant. All I pay is the tax. 2 glorious weeks on the big island. Even Maui is shit now. Fucking tourists. So, are you and Val an item? I mean, I don't want to intrude.
We just met.
She has so many guys. I try to tell her to be selective, but she's gotta have it. The girl's gotta have it. I love that movie. Do you know it?
No.
Jane Mansfield. I love Jane Mansfield. Val's like Jane. Very confused. You know, it's tough for a girl like me, living near a girl like Val. I mean, guys follow Val, give her everything. First it was this Maxwell guy, now it's this Michelle.
Maxwell? Bernie Maxwell?
Yeah, maybe. I saw a check once. She left it on the table and I snuck a peek. So why do you keep talking about Val anyway?
She owes me money.
Well, forget it. So, Pony Cow Wiki Wiki?
Holy cow, wiki wiki.
But yeah, in Sunset Grill, what's sort of the weirdest thing that happens in Sunset Grill? It's a lot of Weller in his apartment, I seem to remember.
Well, his apartment
and drinking.
His apartment is, again, like as she is, what she is to femme fatale, his apartment is to messy apartments.
Right.
It looks like a school play attempts to create a messy apartment where someone's gone, messy apartments, what do they have? Newspapers thrown around, isn't it? Newspaper and a few cans. And when you see this department, you go, it just looks like someone's someone's gone mad and thrown newspaper everywhere,
Right.
but not like an actual messy apartment.
Do you know what it's like? It's like if I had to make an apartment look messy for one of my college movies. That's what it looks like.
Yes, exactly.
When I used to make my college movies.
There's a tremendous sense of it being horribly under-rehearsed. The introduction of the main villain is about as subtle as a clown with exploding pants. There's just general... and there's this huge blonde ape of a bad guy,
right,
who goes around, and this is one of those things that crops up in these films where you go like, oh, that's quite full on for something this ridiculous. I mean, considering we are running through this ridiculous an exercise, that's quite like a full on thing to have, where he kills people by crushing their heads and pushing his thumbs into their eyes.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all very strange, and you're never quite sure who he is or what his game is either.
Yeah, he's straight out of like Lethal Weapon or something. He just looks like, big blonde henchman number one. It's obvious from the moment that Keach turns up and starts doing. I think. Would you agree that Weller grew the mustache to out mustache Keach? Do you think it was like, he's like, who's playing the bad guy? And they're like, Stacy Keach. He's like, oh, he's going to come with that mustache at me, being all mustachy and Keach-like. I'm going to out-mustache him. Because I feel... But it's also completely and utterly random, like, how they come across Keach. Like, there's no detective work or whatever. They just kind of go to a gun range.
He come up to them at the gun range, which is something out of Beverly Hills Cop 2 for,
Right. He just comes up at them at the gun range and is all just Keach at them. And they're like, well, he's clearly the bad guy because he's Keaching it up all
Funnily enough, in terms of Weller films, I think I would actually lump this in with something like Naked Lunch. And the reason I would is that... No, the reason I would is from a very particular irritation that remains for me about Weller, which is I would love to have seen Weller play Marlowe in the Raymond Chandler books.
Right.
I would love to have seen him do a good, solid 40s or 50s or 60s detective film. Just one. I don't need a series. I don't need, like some amazing genre-defining,
like
franchise.
McBride.
I just think I just feel like the one thing that he's never quite done, and the thing he's always been thirsty to do, and the thing that he was born to do, would to be a really good noir detective film. And I love Naked Lunch, but I don't love Naked Lunch. It's all over the place. I love certain things about Naked Lunch, just like I love bits and pieces of these two films. But there is not the film out there there's obviously genius like Blue Jean Cop, but it's not that film. I'm talking about a film where he can legitimately skedaddle and bebop all over it the whole way through, and for it to fit, and for him to be driving an enormous Chevy around the place that's all battered around Hollywood, investigating, a sleazy series of murders. I mean, I would kill to see that film. And all those films, they hint at it, and there are little bits, and there are little shafts of light, aren't there, that sort of show you what sort of a film he could do.
You almost want to edit it together, because if you did it sort of Big Sleep-wise, where none of it really makes a lick of sense anyway, so you could kind of edit all these movies together so that it was, because there's enough kind of, joining material. The only thing would be is that the clips from Sunset Grill would have him wearing, a bright pink CZ top cap and have a mustache you could, eat guacamole out of. Apart from that, all the other movies you could probably stitch together and it would make some sort of sense. It'd probably make more sense.
Well, I'd have the mustache. I'd have the head of Hollywood Homicide. I'd have the outfits and the clothes and the 40s stuff. Not the Interzone stuff, but the 40s stuff from Naked Lunch.
Yeah.
And then I'd have a plot and like a murder mystery, at least a murder mystery that I'm following. There is a mystery taking place running through it.
Well, I think
that's been denied him.
We were very spoiled, I think, by Farewell, My Lovely, in the sense that while obviously it owes a huge debt to the film noirs of the 40s and stuff, in terms of voiceover, using Chandler dialogue, having the right guy for the main part, filming it with some kind of like Hollywood gloss, but still maintaining like the grit of the era. Farewell, My Lovely is pretty unique. You know what I mean? There aren't many of those about with that kind of writing. And it would be incredible to have Weller at the center of something like a Farewell, My Lovely, which is just a good, solid plot. It wraps itself up nicely. It has all the elements you want with the, voiceover and the little nods towards the era and the scene where you go to a whorehouse and the scene where you get hopped up and drugged and beaten up and like all the stuff that, you want from a noir. You would just love, because even Mitchum didn't do anything else that is as good in terms of a Marlowe performance or a detective performance as something like a Farewell, My Lovely. For sheer, what I like to call kind of detective cheese, but done right. Like it's like Farewell, My Lovely is a cheesy noir. Like it's aware of all its cliches, but it just does it so nicely, and it has the right cast. And I just feel like Weller would. I know exactly what you mean. Weller would excel in a movie like that, and he could throw in all the, scribbly-doo jazz beatnik speak that he wants, because it would be completely era appropriate.
His delivery as well is it's absolutely tuned to that kind of genre. It's tuned. It's born for it.
Yeah.
And I watch these films and I just get a bit frustrated because I just think I am having fun watching the schlock, but at the same time, I genuinely, it's not that, like I say, I don't laugh at him in an ironic way. I don't fanboy and go, everything he does is sort of funny and that's the end of it. He is an amusing performer in many ways, but he's amusing because he is so charismatic and he brings that charisma to even the smallest, B-movie throwaway TV enterprise.
Yeah.
He gives it his absolute beams, and I just it just slightly, I just find it slightly tragic that he's not got a Farewell, My Lovely remake, or even though they just didn't toss him another Chandler book like The Little Sister of the Lady of the Lake or whatever it is, and just saying, you know what, let's just fucking make it, with Weller as Marlowe.
Yeah, and it's sort of, I do sort of feel like we did a long time on Radio Drive and we've kind of given Sunset Grill a short end of the stick, but I can't, I've seen Sunset Grill 3 times, and I cannot think, apart from, sitting there going, bloody hell, that's Jonathan Rhys-Davies, or sitting there going, Keach is a sleazy owner of a gun club, or isn't it weird that, like, Weller breaks his alarm clock, and then the very next sequence you see him trying to fix his alarm clock. Like, his life is one long series of breaking his alarm clock and then fixing his alarm clock, instead of just never using his alarm clock. Like you say, the deaths and the murders and stuff are pretty gross. There's a whole sequence in like the doctor is doing something. Aren't they harvesting organs of, like, Mexican?
Yeah, they are. That's right. They're harvesting organs, and there's a bit where he wakes up and they're all there about to harvest his organs.
Right? Isn't that a sequence in the movie? I'm just trying to think now. Yeah.
And that's why it's got both the films have nice ideas in them, nice little bits and pieces, but they just do not cohere in any way. Like,
right.
You're just constantly going, okay, well, I'm entertained, but I'm fucking lost. I'm so lost that it's impossible to really invest anything here.
But isn't it something to do with Keach?
It's something like...
Isn't Keach, like, trying to do something with his, like, health foundation to cure something, and then he's doing it by using the organs harvested from, like, Mexican immigrants through that, like, dodgy doctor who he has to keep, like, drugged up or something because he's addicted to whatever. And on one hand, you're like, oh, okay, so he was doing it for sort of philanthropic reasons, I guess, but on the other hand, he's, like, murdering a bunch of Mexican... Like, I've got a feeling, it was something like that. Like, it's all slowly coming back.
It is. But that's the thing, isn't it? Is that you've watched it twice, and at the end of it, you go, "It's something like that." Like, you can't actually that's the best you can do. It's say it's something like that. And there was a whole scene with, like, a sort of cardboard city and, like.
Well, that's where he gets some of the clues about, like, people who have gone missing.
Yeah. And that's all fine, but there was a whole thing where, like, he'd tipped them off that people were coming to harvest organs or something like that, and then he was watching from a bridge. And I was going, do we need this? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on or what any of this means.
I have no idea what's going on.
The interesting thing about the movie, I guess, is that it's kind of pertinent right now. Like, there aren't... I mean, I don't know. I don't watch a lot of movies about the subject, I guess. But obviously with the whole kind of immigration and Mexico and the wall and Trump and all that kind of stuff. Like, I remember watching Sunset Grill and going, oh, okay, so it's going to have a little bit about the whole kind of Southern California, Mexico immigrant thing going on in it. And that was the other thing I felt by the end of the movie, is like, if that's going to be your central theme, and if that's been a bit of a theme throughout the sort of more contemporary history of America recently, like, that should be part of it. And it really wasn't. Like, the only thing in it was that...
it was token. Yeah.
Was that, oh, they're harvesting immigrants who come over the border because who's going to miss them? That really was it. There wasn't sort of anything more complex than that. And it certainly wasn't saying anything about the nature of immigration. It was saying life is cheap if you're a Mexican who crosses the border, kind of thing.
I know exactly what you mean. And my final note on the film, because I make these little notes and I watch them. My final note in the film is I have no idea what this film's message is.
No,
because they bring up quite serious big things in places, but then it swerves off into, like, ludicrous sex scenes and things, and doesn't seem to be interested in doing anything with them. And it really does, like, in places, it really does seem to want to say something about it, and then just totally fails to follow through.
Does he end up with the woman?
I can't remember.
I know he ends up running Sunset Grill, right? Like, he's cleaned up.
Yes, that's right. He doesn't end up with a woman. Some entirely random woman turns up and is immediately electrocuted by his magnetism and says, like, can we get together sometime? And that is how the film ends.
Isn't she a reporter or something?
Yes,
I don't
know.
There's a Taxi Driver-esque ending where he's, like, heralded as some hero because he saves some guy who then returns to his family or something, and he gets a letter from a Mexican family to say, like, thank you so much for saving our boy or something like that.
Yeah, and there's like a Mexican lad outsiders working for him or something.
Oh no, he asked it to work for him because
he's like just taking in like immigrants and stuff, and you go like, well, that's fine, but it's really not even beginning to actually have a serious conversation or any kind of a message.
But I think really what the story is a moralistic tale about what happens when you leave a guy called Ryder Hart with an enormous porn mustache and instead go with a guy called Jeff. And I think that's what the whole film hinges on. Never go with a guy called Jeff, because if you do, you will be attacked and killed on the counter of your own restaurant.
Yes.
And that's why you never go with a guy called Jeff. And I think that's where really that's where the message is. You want to know the message. The message is avoid Jeffs as much as you can.
Yeah.
So do you have any final points on the Weller, sir, before I have to wrap this up?
No, I continue to look forward to whatever I see him in, and as I say, I love watching these films because he brings so much to them, and he's always so watchable. But particularly with the detective thing, it does slightly sadden me because I think that he's a fabulous performer, and I just wish that he'd been able to do a proper detective thing. It doesn't even need to be a 40s or 50s thing. He could get out and bebop it up like in whatever decade he wants. I really like kind of, oh god damn it, like I really want to see him do like, even like, never mind like a great one, just a serviceable one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
totally.
Just get a guy who wrote a couple of episodes of Morse to write something, like there's got a beginning and a middle and an end,
right,
and a couple of decent actors for him to riff off. Because when Caruso turned up, I was like, well, Caruso is the world's most ludicrous ham, so you're gonna send Weller off into a hammy place by bringing in Caruso. Give him a couple of good people to fence off, a couple of a beginning, a middle, and end. He'll come up with his own lines if you haven't got them, and you're off to the races. And it frustrates me that we're probably never going to see that.
Yeah, it's definitely the most frustrating thing about these two movies, which if you want to find them on YouTube and give them a watch, fine. Rainy Sunday afternoon, they're perfectly serviceable type films. But the most frustrating thing about them is that, like we have done during the episode, we just don't know what's going on or why. And that, if you're having a detective film, the satisfactory thing about a detective film, even something like Chinatown, which yes is confusing, but at least has some revelations at the end of it, where you're like, oh my god, that's what's been going on. Like, you need that moment, and if you don't have that moment, it's problematic. And neither of these movies really have that. And so that's the issue. Sunset Grill certainly makes more sense than Rainbow Drive. I just don't know what's going on in Sunset Grill, but it's certainly easier to follow than Rainbow Drive, which is my memory, even though my memory can't remember what it was I was following. Apart from that, definitely check them out. Now, the other two we had talked about very, very quickly was The Tunnel and Cat Chaser. And I actually sat and watched The Tunnel. Listen, I would be interested just to know what you would make of The Tunnel, because melodrama doesn't even begin to cover it. It is one of the most over-the-top in a way which you're like, all right, Crossy, yeah, it's ludicrous or whatever. No. It has to be seen to be believed to see how just... Like, he literally, the whole movie, he's having sex with Jane, medicine woman, what's her name? Jane Seymour. And then right after having sex with her, he's like, do you love me? You don't love me, do you? You don't love me, you love him. You love him, you only love him. You'll only ever love him. You don't love me, do you? Oh, Jesus, go with it. Anyway, that would be worth watching. I haven't seen Cat Chaser yet, but if you want to do this again, when we've... watch those two movies, then I'd be more than happy. But if you can't find The Tunnel or Cat Chaser, we can pick a couple of others. But this has been an absolute blast, man. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks again for this, man.
It's okay, man. Bye.
All right, so to wrap up this baboop, let us end this scribbly-doo Bebop podcast with yet another track from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures' new album, Former Glory, which can be found at Spotify, Bandcamp, iTunes, Google Play, Deezer, Pandora, you name it, wherever music is found, Amazon, you can find Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures' new album, Former Glory. We're bebopping off with this track from the album. Thanks ever so much for listening, and until next time...
1, 2, 3, 4. This ain't my home sweet home no more. This ain't my home sweet home. Oh no. This ain't my home sweet home no more. Oh, this ain't my home sweet home. This ain't our home sweet home no more. This ain't our home sweet home. This ain't our home sweet home, no more. Oh, this ain't our home sweet home. Time goes backwards. I can't believe how fast. Crooks and cowards. I thought this time had passed. This ain't our home sweet home no more. Oh no, this ain't our home sweet home. This ain't our home sweet home no more. Oh, this ain't our home sweet home. You've just moved in. Your friends already pocketing the silverware. You've kicked some of us out onto the lawn. Do you think we'll just stay laying down out there? 'Cause this ain't our home sweet home no more. Oh no, this ain't our home sweet home. This ain't our home sweet home no more. Oh, this ain't our home sweet home. Sound and bluster, red-faced, red-tie, red hands. Fear and frustration run through pipelines across these badlands. So I ain't gonna walk this road alone no more. I ain't gonna